Welcome to the Purpose-Based Retirement with Certified Financial Planner Casey Weade. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial.
Whatever risk you face during your retirement years, we've got a plan.
A published author and radio host.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
His advocacy for retirees and pre-retirees has made him a sought-after speaker and trusted financial leader.
And putting a real plan together.
This is the Purpose-Based Retirement.
Good to see you again. I'm Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade. He is a certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. We're going to begin the program today with a new way of thinking about retirement, at least one component of it, and that is, why should you focus not just on assets? We'll explain that in just a moment. And then a little bit later, people sometimes struggle with finding the date for their retirement. We'll take a look at that with our guest, Marshall Johnson, the vice president of Howard Bailey, in just a few minutes. Let's get back to that whole idea of focusing not just on assets. When we get to retirement, you want us to think about the other side of that equation, right? The liabilities.
Liabilities. It seems like everybody is looking for this magic figure. We're trying to get to $1 million so that we can retire $200,000 or $20 million, whatever it is. We've arbitrarily picked this figure out of thin air and said, this is what I need to retire. And we start focusing on the assets and not the liability side of the equation. And it's really all about the liability side of the equation, not so much about the asset side of the equation. I had a single lady that I'd met with that spends about $1,500 a month. Now her liability side of the equation, which is expenses, right, is extremely low. $1,500 a month, she can almost live purely off Social Security, needs very little saved for retirement. On the other hand, I had a couple that I met with several weeks ago that were in their mid-40s, planning on retiring in 10 years. And they had about $250,000 saved for retirement, making around $200,000 a year, saving around $600 a month. Well, if they continue at that savings rate in 10 years, they'll have about $500,000 conservatively in their accounts at a 5% growth rate. They said, well, I guess we just need to make more in the way of return. What if we can make 10%? I said, well, if we make 10%, then you'll have $750,000 at retirement, and you'll still be at about $1.3 million short of where you need to be. We have to focus on that liability side, not the asset side, and the biggest liability that a retiree is going to face is going to be taxes. Lincoln Financial Group did a study here in town. They found that 1 out of every $3 of a high-income earner retiree's dollars, their expenses, 1 out of every 3, 30% of your expenses will go to taxes during your retirement years. The biggest expense for retirees, just ahead of mortgage, and larger than auto expenses, travel expenses, and healthcare expenses combined. And it also was a big surprise to retirees when they talked about the biggest surprise that retirees face. The biggest surprise was how much they spent in taxes. The number 2 surprise was how much less they spent on healthcare than they actually thought they would. So, as we can see from this, taxes are a huge expense, and it's one that if we're not focusing on, it seems like we're missing out on one of the largest parts of our financial plan. If our retirement planner is not focused on tax planning, then what are we really getting? Are we getting retirement planning? I don't know.
Yeah, good question. So I'm expecting that my tax rate is going to go down in retirement. I'm going to be down below, that 15% rate, right around in there.
Sure.
Where does all this tax cost come from?
Well, it typically comes from 3 sources. That's going to be Social Security, which will also potentially most likely be taxable as well as any W-2 income, maybe wages or pensions, and then any IRA distributions, maybe required distributions at the same time. We've been trained our whole working lives that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket once you step into retirement than you are today, but that's not true for everyone. The majority of individuals I meet with are in the 15% bracket, meaning they have gross income of around $70,000 to $80,000 a year, and then they step into retirement and they've now still got income needs that are $40,000, $50,000 a year. That still leaves them in a 15% tax bracket, and what's more, they may end up paying taxes on their Social Security benefits, which can effectively turn them into a tax torpedo where they're paying 30 or 40% taxes on Social Security. And so that's something that I think just so often overlooked, is these taxes on these 3 items, our regular income, our W-2 income, our Social Security, and our IRAs.
So this feels like kind of that vicious cycle.
It is a vicious circle, and I say that because you create more income because you have to pay more taxes, and then you pay more taxes, and now you have to create more income in order to meet your expenses. And what's more, it may even mean you spend more money on health care. At the same time, your Medicare Part B premiums may increase. Maybe you're before Medicare age, well, your basic health care expenses may go up. Those premiums you have to pay every month might go up. You might lose some subsidies. So this is that vicious circle. More income, more taxes. We need more income. We end up paying more in expenses.
And we haven't even discussed the possibility that we're in a low tax rate environment right now that's not likely to last.
Right, and that could be something that comes to bite us in the later years. And that's why I say if you've got a lot of time to retirement, you've got a huge opportunity. Stop focusing so much on what you're paying in taxes today and start thinking about what you're going to pay in taxes once you step into retirement. The highest tax bracket in history. You know what the tax rate was, the highest marginal tax rate in history?
Was it like 80%?
96%.
Wow.
And that is something that we have to take into consideration and say that history tends to repeat itself. And we have to be prepared for higher tax rates in the future, considering the level of debt that our country is currently taking.
Sure.
We've got two options. We either lower expenses or increase taxes, probably a combination of the two.
Yeah, it's not going to be one more than the other, right? So what can we do at this point? I know you always talk a lot about tax planning. What are you talking about there?
Well, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I want to touch on a few of them. One being retirement withdrawal strategies. So where you're taking your retirement withdrawals from can really have a huge difference, whether you take that withdrawal from an IRA or Roth IRA, or maybe some of your after-tax dollars. And sometimes it may make sense to have a combination of both tax-free income or after-tax income and tax-deferred income. Because think about it this way, you may have that IRA sitting over here, and 10 years from now, you're going to have RMDs. If we just delay it for the next 10 years, your RMD may go through the roof. And now it pushes you into a higher tax bracket and you have to pay more in Social Security taxes. So why don't we instead blend that IRA income, start taking some of that today and take some after-tax money too. Maybe we can even stay under some of those tax limits when it comes to Social Security, so we pay less on taxes on our Social Security benefits, or maybe even meet a certain tax bracket, stay in the 25 or the 28 or the 15 or whatever it might be.
So when I'm working with you as my planner, what do I bring tax documents with me? How do I get you involved so that you understand everything going on in my world?
Well, when you come in to visit, I want you to bring in all those different things where you have IRAs, bring statements for the IRAs, the Roth IRAs, the 401ks, any annuities that you might have, mutual funds, because we need to take a look at the big picture. It's not just about, well, this is my IRA, this is my non-IRA. We need to see a statement. For instance, on mutual funds. If you have mutual funds in an after-tax account, now we know that you may see a lot of turnover in some of those funds. You may end up paying ordinary income or capital gains on those transactions going on inside the fund, and that's showing up on your tax return. So that's why we want to see that tax return at the same time. We want to see what your investment allocations are. We want to see what type of products you have invested in different things. Maybe you have, for the instance, the other day I saw a gal that had municipal bonds in an IRA. Well, we could get a better grade corporate bond, the municipal bond, and get a higher return out of the corporate bond. Why have tax-free bonds that we're paying a price for that tax-free income inside of an IRA? That just simply doesn't make sense. We have to focus on all of these things in order to put together a comprehensive plan that's going to cover all of your bases, and taxes are just one of those.
And here's one way you can get started with that comprehensive plan, and that's by being one of the next 10 people to call right now, 482-9559. For the next 10 folks who call, we're going to offer a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's an opportunity for you to get an education about your money, because we want you to make the very best decisions you can going forward. So for the next 10 people, Casey and the team will be willing to make some time on your calendar and give you your very own purpose-based retirement if you dial 482-9559. How can you tell when it's time to retire? We have the answer coming up.
Hi, I'm Casey Weade, a certified financial planner practitioner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. Do you feel that your financial professional should put your interests above all else? Well, I do, but Wall Street doesn't. While lobbyists seek to delay a universal fiduciary duty on all retirement accounts across the financial services industry, you can begin working with an advisory team that's ahead of the curve. Don't you want to work with someone who puts your interests ahead of their own? If you said yes, then give us a call today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
And welcome back. We are joined by Marshall Johnson, Vice President at Howard Bailey Financial. We're going to talk a little bit about an important question, and that is finding a retirement date.
Yeah.
We were joking earlier, we're not talking about some type of a dating app
no.
right now. We're talking about the date for your retirement. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Lee, that's one of those questions I think a lot of people come in and they say, when can I retire? Is it 6 months? Is it 6 years? For some people, that's an age. For others, it's a destination or a dollar amount. But for some, it's just a fantasy island. And I think one thing that we try really hard, Casey, is going through that process, trying to understand how much is enough. And that's one of those questions where sitting down and really understanding where we're at in this lifestyle. We talked about the accumulation phase, the income phase, because for some people they need millions of dollars in order to retire comfortably. Others may not need quite so much. So it's about going through that process, trying to find that retirement date.
Yeah, I think for many it's this age that they're shooting for. I hear often, well, I'm going to retire at 66 because that's full retirement, or 67 because that's full retirement age, or 62 because my grandfather did it, or my dad retired when he was 60, so I should retire when I'm 60. Rather than focusing on your own individual situation and start doing that planning before you actually get to that age, because it's not about that age in the first place. You know, it's really about how much our liabilities, right? And those liabilities come with investment risks, expenses, and how much we're going to need to take care of health care, and how much we need to have set aside for emergencies. If we focus on the liability side of the equation, then we can solve backwards to see how much we need to have saved, and then we can start setting a date. Then and only then can we actually start setting a date for our retirement, but we really have to focus in on all these details, and sometimes it's just as easy as having a conversation with someone that can ask you the right types of questions.
So is that where your process, your philosophy comes to play in helping me identify that date?
Yeah, absolutely. And Casey and I, the vast majority of our clients are nearing retirement, stepping into retirement. So for us, it's very important to go through that process and really understand a family. And this is where I get the most fulfillment out of my job, and really helping somebody take control and understand that I have saved enough. I do have enough. I'm putting together a rock solid retirement plan. And so that process, Lee, is really the most important part of that process is understanding your number and really knowing what your lifestyle, what your liabilities are, going through some of those worst case scenarios, Casey, and it's about sometimes preparing for the worst. And then you can hope for the best, right?
Yeah, I think what's really different about that more than anything else, of what I've seen other situations that people have went through with financial advisors or brokers, that they're coming in and they're talking about, well, this is where you are and here's a silver bullet that you have for your retirement. We just need to make 5% a year. We can invest it this way and everything's going to work itself out. Rather than focusing on the big picture and all those different things that are going to come into play. And that takes some time. I think, unfortunately, it's kind of like walking into Ready-Med a lot of the time when you're trying to just get a cold. So if you get a cold, what are you going to do? You're going to run into Ready-Med, pick up a Z-Pack and be on your way. But if you have a major illness, if you had a heart issue, if you had a knee problem, you'd seek consultation maybe a couple different times before you had a major surgery with a specialist. And then after that surgery, you'd have a plan. And retirement, it is kind of like a serious ailment. We're going to have 20 or 30 years of unemployment, and that takes some serious planning. And I think just jumping to a conclusion and prescribing a medication, that's where most advisors go wrong, because it's not about the medication, it's not about the investment product, it's about having this comprehensive plan, liquidity, income, growth, and estate planning.
I'm going to guess that more often than not, people come and meet with you and they find out that maybe they can't retire as early as they might like. Give me a story about that might illustrate that point.
Well, I sat down with a family just the other day that was coming in really late in the game, and they said, Marshall, we'd really like to retire by the end of next month, 6 weeks away. And that's a difficult situation, Lee, when we're stepping in and trying to solve a problem with very limited time. And so those families that are waiting till the end of the time is near and it's crunch time, those are families that I think have to take a step back and realistically understand, if I don't have my ducks in a row 6 weeks out, then I probably need to do some additional planning.
Sure.
Let's look at the other side of the coin. How many people are surprised to learn that maybe I could retire tomorrow?
Yeah, I probably see that side of the coin more often than I do the other, because they've been playing with these retirement calculators, work through their 401k or online. They've just been plugging in numbers, and then it kicks you back this number, and you say, oh, well, I should be okay, or I don't have enough. And a lot of times they'll say, we need $1 million for retirement, $2 million for retirement, when that's really not the case, because they're not taking into consideration all the different inputs that we're going to take into consideration during our initial meeting. I had a couple that I worked with that came from Warsaw that were very frustrated with their current financial planner, because he originally sat down with them a few years ago and said, you'll be able to retire at 60, there's no problem. They came back in a year later and it was 62. And then most recently he bumped it up to 63, and he said, well, there's been some changes in the software that we've been using to calculate these numbers. And I sit down with them and I'm able to show them, hey, you've got enough assets to retire. We can actually, after we factor in all these things, we can get you retired in the next few years. You'll be retired by the time you're 60. And there don't have to be all these different question marks, and it doesn't have to ever change. We can put together this rock solid plan that'll get you retired when you want to be retired. And I left the room. When I came back, she was actually in tears, because it come to find out he had never had a male relative on his side of the family live beyond the age of 67, and she was afraid she was never going to be able to enjoy the time they had left together, and now they could see how that was going to be possible in the next couple of years.
Wow, that's a powerful motivator. So if you work with people who are headed toward retirement, gearing up for retirement, how soon should I schedule a meeting with you? What's a good age for me to start thinking about sitting down with someone who has your particular focus?
Well, in one of our other shows, Lee, we talked about the accumulation phase going into the preservation phase, and it's really that time when we're in our mid to late 50s. If you're nearing retirement, it's about understanding where you're at in that life cycle. And for many folks, they want to get a handle on things 4 or 5 years out, because that's really when we're entering the red zone, and that's when you have to make sure that we protect ourselves, and at no other time are we at the greatest risk than those 3 years leading into retirement and those first 10 years of retirement.
I get really excited when I have a couple that comes in that's getting ahead of the game. They're maybe 55 and they're 5-7 years out from retirement, and that gives us the ability to fill in all the cracks over the next few years, such as helping a couple build their emergency fund. We just need to save $350 a month. That's $4,200 a year. Over 10 years, they'll have a $40,000 emergency fund. They didn't have any tax-free Roth dollars. We were able to set aside $10,000 a year for the next 10 years in Roth. Now they're going to have a really good-sized Roth once they get to retirement. Had they came to us when they were 62, we wouldn't have been able to build that Roth, and it would have been too late to establish that emergency fund. And then we were also able to start doing some long-term care planning today, rather than waiting till the day they retire and maybe they're uninsurable or it costs too much at that point in the game. We are retirement specialists, though. So coming to see us when you're 20, 30 years old, we're not the right guys for that. We're not the right guys to help you outpace the market. We're here to help preserve what you have and start to show you how to create an income that you can't outlive.
Well, if you're in that retirement end zone, kind of like me, I hope you'll pick up the phone and be one of the next 10 people to call right now, 482-9559. Casey and the team are offering a complimentary review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's an opportunity for you to learn more about the things you need to be thinking about, how to plug those gaps, as Casey just said, so you can make the best decisions for you and your family going forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team at Howard Bailey will make time on their calendar to sit with you and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. Well, now on to our question of the day. How much do Americans have in tax-deferred retirement plans? Some big numbers are on your screen. Which one is correct? Casey has the answer next.
You don't walk into a doctor's office for some blanket prescription for whatever ails you. You expect individualized attention, a doctor who listens, and a treatment prescribed to meet your specific need. When it comes to your financial future, why expect anything less? If you would like an independent checkup from an independent advisor with access to hundreds of possible solutions to help you meet your goals, contact us today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
Did you give our question of the day a good think? We asked, how much money do Americans have in tax-deferred retirement plans? Now, you have to think big on this one, but just how big, Casey?
Yeah, well, the answer is actually startling enough. D, $24.1 trillion. And if you don't think the IRS has figured this out yet, then I think you might be a little behind the game. We need to make sure we're ahead of the game, because if you have any tax deferred dollars, if you have any IRAs, there's some things that you can do today to start planning for that. The U.S. national debt currently stands at around $20 trillion. If they could tax that $24.1 trillion in tax deferred retirement assets, such as your IRAs and 401ks, 457s, 403bs, if they tax that at just 20%, that takes care of a quarter of the U.S. national debt. So what you need to do is you need to be prepared for that to come your way. So I want to give you an opportunity today. I want to give you a strategy that's going to help you to start getting out from underneath that tax time bomb that you have called that IRA, because it's just ticking down to the moment where they're going to, at the very least, force you to start taking distributions from that IRA in the form of RMDs, or required minimum distributions, at the age of 70 and a half. But you have the opportunity to get ahead of the game. And I want to show you that strategy called tax arbitrage. We're going to go through the ABCs of tax arbitrage today, and we're going to do it using a case study. We're going to use Betsy. Betsy's age 60. She's a widow, and she's got Social Security benefits of $20,000 a year. She's got a survivorship pension of $40,000 a year because she's lost her spouse, and she's still got the widow's pension of $40,000 a year. So she's got a $60,000 annual income. She's got about $700,000 in IRAs. That's her life savings. The $60,000 a year pretty much takes care of all of her income needs, and she's in the current tax bracket of 25%. Now, if we project this forward, we're going to see that this IRA that's currently valued at $700,000 is going to begin to grow. And as it grows, it's going to turn from $700,000, it's going to turn into $1.5 million. Towards the end of her life, she's going to have an IRA that was worth $700,000, now worth close to about $1 million and $1.25 million, $1.5 million. And at some point, they're going to force her to begin taking distributions from that IRA. When she gets to be 70 and a half, those RMDs, or required distributions, will exceed $50,000 a year. And as we can see from this line, they continue to increase until they're over $200,000 on an annual basis. And as those RMDs increase, the value of the IRA begins to decrease. But what we can do for Betsy here is we can start doing some Roth conversions and taking advantage of her tax bracket. We're going to take advantage of her tax bracket by doing a $40,000 annual Roth conversion so that she doesn't get out too far into the next tax bracket. A $40,000 annual conversion over 10 years allows us to build this huge Roth IRA that's now worth over $7 million by the time she gets to be in her late 90s. If she makes it with us that long, if not in her mid 80s, it's going to be worth over $3 million. And her IRA value, that taxable IRA, is a little bit smaller, so she's leaving behind a tax-free legacy rather than a taxable legacy. Now, what are we doing here? We're accelerating taxable income into some of these lower tax brackets. We're harvesting, or we're accelerating some of the income that we're going to be forced to create later in our lives and starting to lock that in today. If that's your IRAs, we're converting some of those IRAs to Roth IRAs in these lower tax brackets of 10, 15, 25, all the way up to 28%. We may start to question it if it's around 28, but if it's in the 10 or 15% bracket, you should be taking advantage of these conversion opportunities every single year. It could completely change your retirement years. Now, in these higher tax brackets, this is when we typically want to begin to defer or avoid some of that taxable income when we get into that 33, 35, 39.6% tax bracket. One of the things you need to keep in mind as you do this is that tax brackets are graded. I often hear, well, I'm in the 25% tax bracket, the 15% tax bracket, and we think that we pay that level of taxes on everything, but it really doesn't work like that. On the first $18,000 in income, we have 10% tax on that first $18,000. We have a 15% tax on the next $60,000 in income almost. Then it gets into the 25, the 28 to 30. Now, if we're up here, this is where I see the best opportunities. I see a lot of pre-retirees that are maybe now only down to a single income household. They've got one of the two of them still working. Maybe they're making $60,000 a year. Maybe they're grossing even $70,000 a year, $80,000 a year, and they're stuffing some of that money in their 401k. If we could even just do a $10,000 Roth conversion every year for 5 or 10 years, that could mean a huge difference in your bottom line as you step into retirement, having the tax flexibility. Now you've got multiple tax buckets to pull those distributions from in case tax laws change at some form some form or another in the future. Now you've got some flexibility. And there's really only 3 places you can possibly put your money when it comes to those tax buckets: either your 1099 bucket, your tax deferred bucket, and your tax-free bucket. Now, what happens if we max out those tax deferred or tax free buckets? Because that's your IRAs and your Roth IRAs, your 401ks. We may only be able to stick aside $10,000, $18,000 a year. Well, that means we have to look into alternatives. Now we might have to look into estate tax-free and income tax-free alternatives and start getting a little creative with our tax planning, because that's going to be a huge part of your retirement.
So when you're talking about these Roth conversions, I'm not sure everybody tracks exactly what that's about. Can you lead me through the keys to that?
Yeah, the keys to doing a Roth conversion mean that we're taking a traditional IRA and we're converting it. We're paying taxes today, locking them in a lower tax bracket and converting them to tax-free, so we'll never have to pay taxes on them or the growth in the future. You have to know your tax bracket in order for this to work. Fill that tax bracket every single year, project any future RMDs, and sometimes we want to level out those RMDs because we know how much we're going to have to take in the future, even though we don't know what taxes are going to be. So what we can do is we can start to take distributions today and convert those dollars to Roth, so we don't see this RMD that goes from $10,000 to $50,000, but it maybe stays at around $20,000 a year. And this is just part of that comprehensive plan.
So I just want to make clear, people understand that when we're talking about a Roth conversion, that means you're paying tax today. So you're going to be paying a little extra tax, but with a big payoff.
You know, I often liken this, I come from a family of farmers, and what they would often say is a farmer says, you know, I get this big old bag of seed, I spread it out in this field, and I got to pay taxes on this big old crop. You know, I'd rather pay taxes on the seed and then harvest a tax-free crop, and that's really what a Roth IRA allows you to do. The IRA, or the tax-deferred IRA or 401k, makes it so you don't have to pay taxes today, but you will when you start harvesting that thing.
Well, I hope that as complex as this all is, I hope that you know that there is help available. And that's why I hope you're one of the next 10 people who call Howard Bailey at 482-9559. Our next 10 callers will receive a complimentary financial review, a complete review of your financial and retirement plan. It's that opportunity we talk about to give you an education about your money, because we really do want you to make the best decisions for yourself moving forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will make time on the calendar to sit down, visit with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. 482-9559 is the number to call. And if you'd like to get in touch with Casey, you can try him at that same number, or info@howardbailey.com. You can, of course, visit the website of howardbailey.com. And you can also order Casey's book, The Purpose-Based Retirement. That's a different address. Go to thepurposebasedretirement.com and you'll see the opportunity to pick up a copy of Casey's book with all his philosophies there. We'll see you next week.